Today's discussion is going to be a very interesting one because we are now are going to talk that our saviors who are fighting on the front line of COVID-19 war, if we can say it as a war, what are the challenges they are facing? What are the stress they are undergoing? And so what it takes for them to really come out as a savior of this humanity. We have some very distinguished panelists today with us, and interestingly they are also the one who are fighting this war at the front line. So I would welcome our first panelist today, Dr. VN Gangadhar. He is the director of National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS. We have another panelist today, Dr. Nitin M. Nagarkar. He is the director of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Raipur. We will also be soon joined by Dr. K.K. Agrawal, the president of Confederation of Medical Association of Asia, and Oceania and Heart Care Foundation of India. I'll begin with our two panelists for now. Dr. Gangadhar, you take care of an institute which is not only providing mental health support, but also involved in the policy making related to mental health support for the nation and the people. COVID-19 war and the response which we have seen from the healthcare workers, despite all those scarcity and resource crunches, has also inflicted certain issues, mental health related issues on our healthcare workers. Yesterday we were talking that a doctor is supposed to provide care, concern, courtesy, compassion, and communication to the patient. I believe today is the time when the same thing need to be provided to our doctors also. What is your take around how our doctors are rising up to this situation, and despite all these challenges are ensuring that healthcare is being provided to the people who need it uninterruptedly? Thank you so much, sir. Please.
Okay. Thanks, Narayanji, for inviting me on this webinar. I'm also honored to be with our distinguished colleague, EMS Raipur, Dr. Nagarkar. I believe ENT people are at the highest risk of getting iatrogenic or hospital-related infections for COVID. Sir, you are in the war front, your department. I totally appreciate and bow my head down to your profession among on the medical specialties. You are doing a great job. Coming back to what my profession is, being a psychiatrist, I want to share a few things which may be very important. COVID, although it's a viral infection, there are more problems related to non-medical issues than about medical issues. When I'm saying non-medical, I'm referring to social and economic issues. And these have indirect impact on mind and psyche. So the mental health, although it could be a part of the medical illness, making the person feel depressed, irritated, and low in mood, lose his well-being, but good amount of contribution also comes from other social consequences of the pandemic, lockdown, economic depravity, and 100 other things. So it looks like while there are a group of people who attend to only the medical problem, and there are a group of people who attend to only the social problem about lockdown, the police, the politicians, the administration. The mental health people have to borrow from both components and then work. It is about working on well-being of both the affected and those who are not affected. So it's a Herculean task. I think not just the medical profession, but a lot of other non-medical people also have to play a role in mitigating this stress-related uh, distress which is there with all these populations. So, firstly, uh, I must say that the WHO's definition, there's no health without mental health. When I'm talking of mental health, I'm not talking here about mental illness, but a question of mental well-being, which is greatly compromised in individuals who are both affected and who are not affected with the infection. Both groups have a compromised well-being status. So this has been recognized, realized, and right from the day the COVID pandemic began, the work for mental health professionals has been on a top priority to the government. In fact, the government asked us to set up a telephone helpline for psychosocial distress mitigation. A helpline was started, and till now we have received as many as about 7.5 lakh telephone calls from all over the country. This is just one line that the government of India through us has established, but I'm sure there are a lot of telephone helplines that have been set up by a lot of well-meaning NGOs, many other medical colleges, psychiatric societies, and most of them have set up this facility to make sure that well-being is facilitated in a situation like this. Being well, being a person who has a lot of resilience can also provide indirectly some immunity to the infection itself. And it is known that if you have a will, you have a way. And the will of fighting the illness should also not only represent in the form of seeking medical help, making sure that your hygiene is protected, etc., etc., but also a will to fight the illness by way of your own energies or whatever you want to call it. This would mean that a person is exercising, a person is following some safe dietary principles, keeping away from drugs, alcohol, etc. So many of these, what we may call as lifestyle measures, are very important, which will come up if the person has a will to fight through this entire pandemic. So the mental health professionals take care of two aspects: promoting wellness and also the well-being, and also help the individual to overcome other social concerns that the individuals may be facing. So in this regard, I have three important points to make. One is that the timely action by most health departments, whether state or central, in terms of responding to the individual's not just healthcare needs of related to the COVID infection, but also the psychosocial distress. On both counts, most ministries have taken a very prompt action. Prompt action in terms of releasing several brochures, small video clips, educating them and telling them what they should do during the lockdown period, what they should do in anticipation of a throat swab test, and a series of events. Many of them are already available in the public domain in the health ministry website. I'm not going to allude to that. So what is important is to be communicated to the public is extremely responsive departments of health across all states and across the center as well. To the limited possible extent, they have put in all efforts and tried to mitigate the concerns as regards mental health and also about the COVID infection. So you have a fairly responsive governments at all levels. This is very important. The second issue is the degree to which people have adhered to rules. If a rule has been passed, majority of them have adhered to the rules. I must appreciate the public during the lockdown. Yes, you have seen in TVs, in various social media where people broke the rule. But I must say, for having seen the public, lot of them are following rules. It's a credit to the Indian population and an ordinary Indian citizen that he or she takes any ruling that is coming from the ministry seriously, and a good chunk of them follow. Yes, I agree. If all had followed, maybe we would have been more victorious than what we have achieved now. But I am sure the credit of the success also goes to the majority population who have actually adhered to the rules of not going out, keeping social distance, wearing masks, making sure that they wash their hands before they touch anything, avoiding eating indiscriminately on the roadside, and making sure that their marriages or other ceremonies are small, avoiding unnecessary meetings and exploiting all telecommunication. This webinar is an example of me reaching out to people using telecommunication, telemedicine. See, for example, the Medical Council of India very promptly introduced the telemedicine guidelines, making it official. So on several fronts, I think the public have also reacted extraordinarily responsibly to make sure that this should be mitigated. So put together the responsiveness of the government and the responsibility that the public have actually shouldered. Both put together, I'm sure the people should now understand. I think they have understood that we are a responsible society, and I'm sure the stress and the distress has already to an extent been mitigated. To my impression is that. The second observation, the third observation which I want to make is, for some reason or other, from whatever I have seen, although I'm not directly in the war front of treating COVID individuals, from whatever I hear from my colleagues who are actually treating them, the magnitude or the severity of the condition among those who are actually found positive has not been as alarming as we have been reading in the Western literature or in the news elsewhere. So for some reason or other, it's a possibility, although it remains to be tested academically and scientifically. It looks like the morbidity related to this infection is not as grave as what it was thought when the epidemic started. So we don't know what is protecting us. That the biological component of what is protecting us remains to be investigated. So put together, my own observation in these 3-4 months of the pandemic, which I have gone through ever since it began, that there have been several lessons that we are going to learn, several reassurances that we have already got, and I'm sure all of us have to convey to the public. It's also important to say that continued vigilance, maybe for several months, maybe a couple of years, is very, very important to make sure that this is brought to as minimal levels as possible. So whatever we have learned in these 3 months of lockdown, worsening of the pandemic, etc., etc., these precautions, I believe people have already realized that this has to be observed. I have to give you just one example of what has happened when the lockdown was lifted in the city of Bangalore. We thought we will open the outpatient services of Nimans. Initially, we had a gush of patients, long queues, poor social distancing, etc., etc. Although we had taken a lot of preparations, telephonic appointments, and a larger waiting hall, so many things that we had taken, but yet a lot of people started coming. Over the course of time, they realized that we have to make sure crowding should not happen. We should avail telephone services, telephone follow-up that Nimans is offering. They also realized that priority is to avoid getting infected rather than having to jump to reach a hospital for not so emergency psychiatric or neurological condition. The numbers have dwindled over the last 1 month, ever since we began our outpatient follow-ups, making it available to the public after the lockdown was lifted. So it looks like the public are also extremely responsibly reacting, and I must congratulate our population, our compatriots who have taken this mission very aggressively. Only appeal is that we need to remember that this virus is going to be with us. It's going to be with us in some form or other. Eternal vigilance is the only way we can succeed in mitigating it as best as we can. I'm sure the same message will be passed on by other esteemed colleagues. And I also thank Narayanji and all other colleagues who are with me. And for the first time, I'm able to directly see Dr. Agarwal. Namaste ji. I've been reading about you and honored that I am associated with such great personalities on this TV show or on the webinar. Good luck. I have an interview to conduct for the department. I was hoping between 11 and 11:30 I will be excused after that. Although I'll be listening to you, I'll be continuing my business. I want you to excuse me. I'll keep this audio on and continue to listen to the program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gangadhar. And it's wonderful to hear from you that you have seen that there has been a proactive response from the government as well as the society, as you mentioned and highlighted. So thank you so much. We'll continue with this discussion with others. So let me now go to Dr. Nitin M. Nagarkar. Dr. Nagarkar, Dr. Gangadhar said that there has been a good response from both sides, and we are largely able to mitigate the pandemic mortality as well as the psychosocial distress as well. Dr. Nagarkar, you are on the front line of this war, and you are facing it day in, day night. Your people, your nurses, your paramedics are facing it. We want to understand that what is their mental state and what are the challenges they face, and how do you try to mitigate those challenges. What are the when a doctor come to the hospital every day, what plays in his mind during this time of pandemic? They are also equally vulnerable. We have seen thousands of medical workers getting infected, and obviously they are affected every day. Their families are affected every day. So Dr. Nitin M. Nagarkar.
So thank you very much for inviting me. My pleasure. As very rightly said by Professor Gangadhar, it's a wonderful platform, and thanks very much to the Integrated Health and Wellbeing Council, Kamal Narayan ji, Himani Singh ji, and of course the rest of the team for putting it across. Thanks to Professor Gangadhar in his opening remarks, he's made it very clear that the Indian public has really responded very well to the call of the government and the health professionals. Dr. K.K. Agarwal, again, good morning to you, sir. I've been hearing and reading about you. I was in Chandigarh for many years before I came to Raipur in 2012 as the director. So nice to meet you and to hear from you. We've been listening to him on various occasions, on various topics. So again, coming back to the question which you very rightly mentioned, that the healthcare professionals are at the forefront today. And I think right from the time that the first case came up in China and then subsequently started spreading in other countries, our government has been very proactive, right, in the center and in the state governments. This message was passed on that this infection is going to spread rapidly. The WHO had given a call that it's going to become an emergency, and it did become a pandemic. So there was a lot of preparation which was going on in the states also, and of course through the center and ICMR also. We have been lucky that being a Government of India autonomous organization, we follow all the rules of the Government of India and ICMR, and we teamed up very well with the state government over here. And we've seen almost close to 600 admissions in our own hospital. And at the same time, the challenge was to run the COVID as well as the non-COVID services, like Professor Gangadhar rightly mentioned that they had to open the OPDs also, which we also did. So coming to the point that how were the doctors, how was their approach, or the healthcare professionals, nurses? First and foremost, we made it very, very clear to all the individuals who are here that everyone has to work as a team during this global pandemic. There is no one single individual which can fight this particular infection. It's a global crisis. We need to follow the rules. And this is one particular pandemic or infection that we're going to face, which is different from others that we have faced so far. The world has known about Ebola or Nipah or Zika. Time and again, these outbreaks have occurred. But in India, to face an infection like that, doctors had already started seeing those images where the healthcare professionals wear the PPE kits and manage these patients. Then they started reading about how in New York, the mortality rates were picking up and overwhelming even the Western countries where they are supposed to have possibly better or more geared up medical facilities. So a lot of preparedness was there in our case, if I'm talking about our own institution. We prepared them in the sense that whether to have a dedicated facility in the beginning, because it is at the cost of some of the other non-COVID facilities. So we did develop a 200-bedded COVID facility with screening zone, isolation beds, HDU, everything ready over there. We teamed up with the state because we had to train their officials as well and handhold them. We were fortunate to have a VRDL, the Viral Research and Diagnostic Lab over here. which once we started receiving kits, we started doing the testing, which has been actually the main issue. And so large number of tests were conducted at our own institute, almost close to 60,000 tests we have done at our place, almost 1,000 to 1,200 a day on an average, and also help the other labs. So we kept on training them and telling them this is something which we are seeing is new, but don't worry about it. If we work as a team and if we are well prepared, then we should be able to face it. The first case came to our hospital on the 18th of March of this year, and when she came, she was a girl who had come from UK and had tested positive. So the entire team was ready. The team included the faculty members, the junior residents, senior residents, the nursing staff, even the person who's going to give the food to that particular patient, then the housekeeping staff and the security guards and ambulance driver. So an entire cadre has been created specifically dedicated towards managing COVID-19 patients. And then that small trickle started and became much larger over a period of few weeks. And we are now seeing approximately 150 to 170 admissions per day, total patients in the hospital, inpatients. Admissions range from about 30 to 35 per day. So anytime we have around 150 odd patients COVID positive, and all the otherwise sick patients, the pregnant women, comorbidities, very small children. We conducted 4 deliveries, 2 cesarean sections, and other surgeries also being done in COVID positive patients. So the whole thing was training them. Even yesterday we had another training session. So batches come, work for 10 days, and then they go for a quarantine for 2 weeks, depending upon which area of the hospital or high risk area they were working. Every time there is a training, every time there is an infection control team which is over there. Definitely when we ask them how they feel before the training and after they have completed their quarantine period and they come back to work, we ask how was the experience, like you exactly asked this question. Initially they were a bit worried, perplexed when they were going to face this kind of an infection for the first time. Even senior doctors haven't come across this kind of a pandemic in the past. They might have faced other infections or other life-threatening conditions, but not like this. So, but gradually the trainings have helped, and that fear had gone away because of the empowerment of the work that they were doing as well as the training. At the end, when they finished the tenure of 10 days and a quarantine of 2 weeks, they came back, I think, much more satisfied that they had actually given their best. They did mention about the difficulties, like, for example, wearing a PPE kit in this kind of a weather. It is really very difficult to wear it and see and manage a patient. It becomes very hot, one sweats inside, it becomes foggy, very difficult to do a procedure. Really, they have gone, they have given their best to the country, I would say. Really, they have struggled. At the same time, we know that some of the, healthcare workers are bound to get the infection. All the time, even when the patient, even the person takes off the PPE kit, there is an infection control nurse to tell exactly how to donning and doffing. Everything is done under their care. But in spite of that, some individuals did have infections. Of course, they're fortunate that they all recovered, but that risk is there. And this risk is something that we really want to make it as less as possible by training, by sensitization, whether it's a junior resident, whether it's, and then it's the responsibility of the seniors to ensure that even the healthcare worker who is at the, whichever end he's seeing the work, the one who is disposing of the biomedical waste, each one of them is at risk, and we should take care of each and every individual of them. And at the same time, we should pat their backs. If they've done a wonderful job, they've saved so many lives. In Chhattisgarh, we are very fortunate to have a very good recovery rate, a relatively much lesser mortality rate than other parts of the world, I would add. So a lot of effort they have put in, and the ministry has supported us each and every time. So we were already having adequate PPE kits, N95 masks, other protective gear, so that our doctors or healthcare workers should never feel the shortage of that. So preparedness was the key. Keeping their morale was always the key. And again, the same thing happened with the patients also. When they got admitted, they were jittery, naturally afraid what has happened to them, like sir rightly mentioned. But gradually they realized that majority of them are going to improve and are going to come out like almost like normal healthy individuals. This is precisely what happened. Only few of them became very sick or could not make it. So I think a very good success rate. We should really appreciate all the healthcare workers. There's a definite risk of infection in this particular pandemic we are facing, but we should support them nonetheless at every step. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nagarkar. And I'll now go to Dr. K.K. Agrawal. He is one of the most prominent figure of Indian healthcare system. And I'll again, introduce him also. He's the president for Confederation of Medical Association in Asia and Oceania, and also the head of Heart Care Foundation of India. A very prominent cardiologist, and has been working a wonderful work in the area of heart care awareness and as well as the delivery of care. Dr. Agrawal, you heard Dr. Gangadhar saying about the response of the government and then the response of the society. Dr. Nagarkar also has highlighted very well that despite there was some kind of fear initially, with the right kind of training, resources, and the management, and also appreciation, they have been able to deliver good results so far. The entire event is about appreciation. We are here to appreciate the work of our healthcare professionals and doctors. But when they are working in these challenging times, definitely they expect much more from the system, from the public, and from their colleague. Dr. K.K. Agrawal, I would like to have your keynote address on that where do we stand there, and how as a nation and as a society we need to stand with our healthcare workers.
Thank you, Kamal, and thank you other colleagues sitting here, Dr. Nagarkar, Dr. Gangadhar, and thank you for inviting me. We are medical professionals, we are doctors. We represent the collective consciousness of the health status of the society. A doctor means somebody who believes in beneficence and non-maleficence. Sabka bhala, kisi ka nuksan nahi. And our job is to heal. Our job is to do whatever we want to do and leave the results to the patient's immunity and the patient's destiny. So our job is to heal. Very rarely we as a doctor gets an opportunity like an army man. He always looks for an opportunity to fight in the battle. This opportunity has come to all the people in this generation to handle a pandemic. A new disease, nobody knows what it is. Unfortunately, China never shared their experiences with others. So therefore, Iran had to learn of its own mistakes. Italy had to learn from his own mistakes. US is learning from his own mistakes. Europe learns from its own mistakes. And in India also, we are learning from our own mistakes. We are better prepared because we have seen mistakes of others. But even then, we will say, even we did mistakes of not declaring a lockdown on 31st of January when the first came in India. Doing a lockdown on 22nd of March, we had enough cases in the country. Therefore, now we cannot stop. So everything was evident and it was oncoming. We were only delaying things. Now today we have learned a lot. Indian coronavirus is different from the Western coronavirus. It is different from other coronaviruses. It's different. In Europe and in US, we are seeing an inflammatory response in children. In India, we are seeing a post-COVID inflammatory response in everybody, the adults. India is basically having a post-COVID inflammatory response. So if I want to simplify a few facts, based on my experience of over 2,000 patients which I've handled in the last 1 month, one experience is that in children, mortality is hardly any. In women, the mortality is hardly any. There are two types of stages of corona. One is a COVID phase, one is a post-COVID phase. I define a post-COVID phase after 9 days when the virus becomes non-replicative, because as on today, we have no evidence that the virus multiplies after day 9. Therefore, in the that is the COVID phase, we divide them into 3 phases. First 3 days, middle 3 days, and the last 3 days. The middle 3 days are the ones which are serious, specifically for the pulmonary COVID. So if you have congestion in the chest, and if you develop a ground glass opacities in your lungs, and if you develop pneumonia, This is the time when you diagnose early, you can get happy hypoxia, you can get ARDS, you can get anything. Therefore, at the onset of a pneumonia, if you give them an intravenous antiviral drug, or with steroid, with any other anti-inflammatory, and if you give them at particular motion, if you give them a low molecular weight heparin, you will be able to save them. In a post-COVID phase, which is after 9 days, before in the COVID phase also, you have extra pulmonary manifestations. That means a patient may come with diarrhea, with cystitis, with right iliac inflammation in the right iliac fossa. They may come with loss of smell, loss of taste. All these are normal. They are all going to go away. They are non-serious. So the only serious is day 4, 5, and 6, and that is pulmonary COVID. Next comes is a post-COVID phase. After 9 days, COVID is gone. The virus is gone. The virus is non-replicative. Now you have a post-COVID 2 things. One, sequelae of what damage has occurred. That means a person may have a post-COVID bronchitis. A person may have a post-COVID irritation in the throat. And then comes this persistent inflammation. So after 9 days, if you find out of 4 parameters, which is ESR, CRP, ferritin, and LDH, if 2 of them are positive, you call them as a post-COVID persistent inflammation, like we see a persistent inflammation of arthritis in chikungunya. So therefore, now we treat them as a post-COVID persistent inflammation. They may have persistent fever, they may have persistent diarrhea, they may have persistent cystitis, they may have persistent inflammation in the right iliac fossa. So this is a post-COVID persistent inflammation stage. It may require a short course of steroid, hydroxychloroquine, colchicine, or NSAID. So this is what we are learning. I'm going to end by making 2 bold statements that it is very difficult to die because of COVID. You literally have to work hard in dying because you will have to ignore so many things to die. There are enough signals for you to save yourself. Mortality is an exception, not a rule. Recovery is the rule and not an exception. This is as on today, 2nd July of 2020. This may not have been true 15 days back. This sentence may not be true after 15 days. After 15 days, we may say 0% mortality. But as on today, yes, this virus mortality with adequate and effective and early treatment, nobody should die. Thank you.
Sir, thank you so much for describing this so well. And then it is very interesting to hear that you really need to work hard to die of COVID. But I want to also know from you that what you feel for the entire healthcare community. What you said that they have got this lifetime opportunity of being a warrior. But are these warriors, adequately equipped? Are we standing with them? You have seen that.
Kamal, I am saying is that an opportunity was given to Ayurveda to come forward. They lost the opportunity. An opportunity was available to homeopath to come and become the frontline treatment-oriented people. They haven't come forward. An opportunity was there for everybody, and still the opportunity is. I have narrated what we need. At this moment, we need a drug to post-inflammatory, post-COVID inflammation. Let anybody come back and say, I'm very clear in saying is that we don't require hospitalization except when you need a ventilator. Therefore, infrastructure we don't need. If you are going to fill up the hospitals with patients, you are going to cross-infect the healthcare workers. So healthcare workers should manage only those patients who need a ventilator. If you need an oxygen, treat them at home. Home care and telemedicine care are the 2 achievements of COVID. Treat everybody at home, let the doctors be there, let every private doctor be involved, let every nurse be involved. Treat patients at home, give them full care, and let the doctors treat only patients who require a ventilatory care. Make all oxygen concentrators available at home. You will require no infrastructure, because what is happening is by admitting these patients who don't require admissions, you are affecting the non-COVID care. A time will come, non-COVID patients will start dying because they are not getting the beds. So why should we, there should be a selected 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% who need ventilators. Let them be treated. Let all others be treated like a non-COVID emergencies are there. People are not touching them. People are, I have patients who are lying with they said, I need a surgery. A doctor says, no, 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 and no. So non-COVID patients are getting absolutely ignored. Your COVID patient should be managed at home. I'm very clear about it.
Thank you so much, sir. So this is very important message that COVID patients should be taken care of as much as possible within the the four walls of home, and which is much better for them to recover faster, I think also. And also it is going to help the entire healthcare system to focus on something which is of higher emergency, and so that no one is dying of heart attacks or strokes or any other major issues or cancer, which are, we are seeing the patients suffering because of this whole fear created around COVID-19. So thank you so much, Dr. Agrawal, for your time, and also Dr. Nagarkar for your kind time to join us on this inaugural session of day 2 of Gratitude Week. We place our heartfelt regards to all our healthcare workers, people like you, Dr. Nagarkar, Dr. Gangadhar, Dr. K.K. Agrawal, and millions of others who are working at every stage of healthcare delivery.